guys, hi, how's it going? How's everybody doing today? Hopefully today finds you well. Today I am doing the 20 best palettes from 20 brands. I did a 20 worst not that long ago and I'll link it in the eye for you. But everybody, it was a resounding please do this for 20 best in the comment section, and I had already had it on the plan, so I planned to bring it to you, and today is the day. So I am wearing my Bena Babe sweatshirt, feeling a little, I don't know, about how I'm showing up on camera right now. My lens is being a pain in my butt. But with that said, I hope that sounds like something that you guys are interested in. And if it does, please keep on watching. For those of you new here, hi, my name is Donna. I'm a lover of all things high and colorful beauty and self-care. I also work in the beauty industry as a field leader for Ulta Beauty. I get a lot of education in my position. I like to bring you that education here, but ultimately I'm just out here talking about makeup because I like to talk about makeup. And I'm assuming if you're here, you also love to talk about makeup. So let's do just that. Let's talk about some makeup. Today's video is all about palettes, and it is 20 best palettes from 20 brands in my collection. So some caveats to this. I've done this video before for like 20 best products at Sephora by 20 different brands, 20 best products at Ulta by 20 different brands, 20 best products by 20 different brands cumulative, like whatever. I don't think I've done this for palettes before. And I didn't really realize that until I was researching what I had done for this video in the past, and there isn't one. I mean, there is if I could only choose one from every category or from every brand in my collection, but this is different because for me to deem it the best palette, I had to have at least tried 3 different palettes from said brand and had those palettes in my collection at one point in time or another. There are 2 brands on here that I no longer own 3 palettes from, but I did own 3 palettes from them, and I have decluttered some of those palettes, so I'm calling it a wash. I don't have a whole lot of brands in my collection anymore, or I guess I don't have 20 brands in my collection anymore that I own 3 or more palettes from. I have a lot of one-offs, but I also just know what I like in terms of eyeshadow formulas. So I have a ton from one brand or another, but also not a lot of different brands. There are brands that I am trying, but I just don't have 3 or more palettes from said brands. So that's where they're at. Every single palette in this makeup of 20 best palettes from 20 brands is from a brand that I have had 3 or more palettes from. I have tried 3 or more palettes from, including dipping into every single shade, as you guys know, through my Palette Roulette series. So let's jump in, and I'm just gonna start with what's on top because I think I pulled them in no particular order. So my first 20 best from 20 brands. My first brand would be ColourPop. And for me, the Baroque eyeshadow palette from ColourPop would have to be the best of the best. Like, I don't have very much ColourPop in my collection. I currently have 3 palettes from ColourPop in my collection, but I've had, I think 3 other ones that I have decluttered. And this has just stolen my heart. It's such a beautiful palette. It also is just a palette that I deem perfection for the winter months. It's got a beautiful color story to it. It leans a little bit blue, but it's got like some really beautiful like deep tones, like this like burgundy over here. And the shimmers in this are just, they're stunning. And in addition to that, this is a palette that doesn't have like pressed glitters in it, which I hate. And it was just a really good launch from ColourPop. For Viseart, my best is going to be the Viseart Dark Mattes. Listen, I use this palette a lot. I use it so dang much. It's been in my collection for a very long time. This is a palette that I can count on to like deepen up any look that I want to do. It's got 2 different shades of, you know, the main tones that I wear: red, purple, blue, orange, and green. Like, it is just stunning. It truly is stunning and such a great formula of eyeshadow. Viseart has some really great eyeshadow formulas. I do own 4 palettes from Viseart, and I have not decluttered one. Violet Voss is going to be like a boss. So first and foremost, I love Violet Voss's formula. I think I've said that before, but this palette is one that I've done a collaboration with a friend with, and I just love the tones in here. It's got some really great neutrals. It's also got some really great pops of color. The eyeshadows in this formulation are really smooth and buttery and great. And the shimmers in this formulation they're not like chunky monkey like some of the newer shimmer formulations are, because, you know, they're super sparkly. These aren't going to be in your face sparkly sheeniness, but they are beautiful and impactful on the lid. And this happens to be my favorite of the 3 Violet Voss palettes that I have in my collection. I have also had some of this brand's fun size palettes, and I did happen to declutter, I think, 5 fun size palettes in last year's palette declutter, because I just find that with the 3 palettes, the 3 large palettes that I have from Violet Voss, the Like a Boss, the Holy Grail, and the Flamingo, I have all the colors that I could have had in the fun size palettes in those 3 palettes. I think there's one that I decluttered because it was a hot mess of a fun size palette. But other than that, I have had quite a few Violet Voss palettes in my collection, and that one stands out as my favorite. This one is Juvia's Place. This is the Juvia's Place Nomad palette. I go back and forth between this one and Tribe, but I really do think that of this one, between this one and Tribe, this one has to be the best for me, because the center shimmer shade is just stunning. The yellows in this palette, the grungy tones in this palette, I pull for this palette more often than I pull for the Tribe, because the Tribe is very green. This one can kind of swing very fall. It can be very spring. It's got a variety to it that Tribe doesn't have. So with that said, I think that this would probably be my favorite in the Juvia's Place mindset. If there were one that could be in the running for a potential like close first runner up, it's going to be Magic Mini, because that one is super versatile. I just don't love that it doesn't have as many mattes in it as I wish it had in it. From Tarte, I have the Tarteist Pro. Now, I did go back and forth with this one and the Tartelette in Bloom, but I really do think from the perspective of variety, and if this could be a one and done eyeshadow palette for me, I do think that this one would take the prize there, whereas the Tartelette in Bloom is very everyday friendly. It's so easy to use, but this one just has more of those like colorful shades in it that I really like to pull from. And even though it only has 4 shimmers in it, they are 4 shimmers that work well with any of the colors in this palette that you want to place them with. So this would be my best from Tarte. From Blend Bunny Cosmetics, I have the Dollhouse palette. I did go back and forth with this with the Lure palette. I just think that I had an easier time with this palette than with the Lure palette. And again, through the mindset of, could I use this every single day? I think I absolutely could. I also really love that this palette specifically has 2 rows of shimmers in it, whereas every other Blend Bunny Cosmetics palette I have has only 1 row of shimmers. So I just love this palette so much. The only one that I would say is a dud in this palette is this one here. I really did not get along with this shimmer shade here, but that's okay, because I have a ton of other shimmers that I could use in this palette. So I'm 100% okay with one shimmer not working out super hot for this palette. But my God, the mattes just blend so nicely, and they're super pigmented. Really an easy palette to use. For Huda, I pulled in New Nude. This is a really old palette by Huda Beauty, but honestly still remains my favorite. I have a ton from Huda Beauty, actually. This is one of the, you know, makeup brands in my collection, one of the formulations in my collection that I have an awful lot from. I have a ton of her Obsession palettes. I have almost every single one of her holiday season palettes, which is what this is, and this still remains my favorite. I do not love the two like glitters in this palette. I should just dig them out because I will never use them. But this still remains my favorite. It's the easiest to use. It's such a beautiful, like when you think bridal makeup kind of palette, this one would suffice bridal makeup, and it's just beautiful. It's just a beautiful palette to use. My favorite from Onsai is going to be the Onsai Flora Story palette. This was in collaboration with Makeup Just for Fun. And, you know, I love Onsai. Onsai is a brand that I just tried. This collaboration was my first time trying Onsai. And since then, I have the 3 palettes that came in this collection and the 2 Angelica Nyquist Halloween palettes. I'm still like testing those palettes, right? They're on my eyes today. I could say that probably one of those could be a favorite, but ultimately when I think about the color stories that I use and use often and that I could use every single day, ones that could stay in my collection and be a perfect palette for me, it would be this one. It's beautiful. It's got the gorgeous purples, the gorgeous greens, the beautiful shimmers. It's got a really light, really deep shades, a kind of a pop of a weird color over there. I just think it's such a beautiful color story. And again, Onsai's mattes are so good, but my God, their shimmers are beautiful. So the Onsai Flora Story palette would have to be my favorite from them. For Too Faced, it's going to be Natural Nude. I think that this has been my favorite from Too Faced for a very long time. I think I honestly, if it wasn't for nostalgia pieces with the rest that is still in my collection from Too Faced, this could be the only Too Faced palette that I have in my collection. Again, really easy to use, goes from super light to super dark. It has a coordinating shimmer for every single matte in the palette. It's just really pretty, probably the best of the best as in terms of Too Faced. Like, Too Faced is not a brand that I love, but I can't see me ever getting rid of this palette. And also, it's just really a sleek palette when I think of it in terms of the Lorac Pro, which is one that's in this collection as well. They're just so sleek. They're so easy to have in your collection because they don't take up a whole lot of space. So let's go into Lorac. This is the Lorac Pro. I have had 5 Lorac eyeshadow palettes in my collection in the past. So this is one that I no longer have 5 Lorac eyeshadow palettes from. I no longer even have 3 Lorac eyeshadow palettes. This is the only Lorac eyeshadow palette that still exists in my collection, and there must be a reason why. It is, as far as I am concerned, the best of the best. Now this one is different because it is a very cool tone eyeshadow story, which I don't think you've seen in a lot of the, yes, a lot of those do have cools and warms, but I am more of a warm eyeshadow look connoisseur. So this one being one of the best and the only living Lorac palette still in my collection must say something. This white over here is probably the best white I have in my collection, period. And I think I've said that before. You guys probably have heard me say that before. The other one that I no longer have 3 eyeshadow palettes from is Dominique Cosmetics as a brand. Listen, I don't know that I love Dominique Cosmetics as a brand, but I do know that I have had 5 Dominique Cosmetic eyeshadow palettes, and this one and the Celestial Storm are the only 2 that are left standing in my collection. I do love this palette for the functions of taking with me on a long trip, right? Having all the things that I need, because the pan sizes in this palette are so big. You can fit your blush brush in here. You can fit your contour brush in here. And it has the perfect shades for that. This is a really great contour shade for me. This is a really great highlighting or under eye setting powder for me. It's got that kind of pink kick that everybody's into these days. This is a great blush for me. I would say that this is also a great blush for me. Plus it's got all the eyeshadows. This is a great glowy bronzer. This is a great regular bronzer. So this is an all over kind of palette for me. And I think that that's why, in my mind, it is the best of the best. But I only currently own 2 Dominique eyeshadow palettes, and this one and that one have continued to make it through declutters because I really do love these 2, even though I don't love Dominique Cosmetics overall as a brand. Urban Decay. This should come as no surprise. This palette here, catalyst to my channel here. This palette here, also, man, so freaking cool, right? Should I be using this on my eyeballs still? Probably not. Do I use this on my eyeballs still? Yes. Why? Because it's beautiful. This is beautiful. And I am not an Urban Decay formulation fan. Like, I have had several Urban Decay palettes in my collection that I have decluttered. Most of my naked palettes have gone by the wayside. The only naked palette still remaining in my collection is my little tiny like Urban Decay Smiley that I haven't even used, and my Urban Decay Robin Eisenberg because it is beautiful. Every other Urban Decay palette I have is not from the Naked line because I do not like the Naked line. But this one is the one that I can't get rid of, even if you told me if I used it again on my eyeballs, I would lose an eyeball. I would keep it in my nostalgia drawer for the rest of time. I would continue to swatch it. It's just so pretty. And I have like an emotional tie to it. So there's that. But this, in my humble opinion, beyond it being my favorite Urban Decay palette, I really do feel like this one had the best Urban Decay formulation ever, because it's just so pigmented. It stays so long. It blends like butter. It doesn't muddy on top of it. It's just such a beautiful formulation for Urban Decay, and really truly inspiring, because it inspired me to do this YouTube thing, and I love that. Favorite from ABH, you guys have probably heard me talk about it 100,000 times, and it will probably always remain Jackie Aina, because they just don't make palettes like this anymore. Now, I have one in my collection that I haven't tried yet, but I do have somewhere around 13 or 14 ABH eyeshadow palettes, and then I have 6 of the ABH X Norvina eyeshadow palettes, and this still is like my favorite eyeshadow palette by ABH. And this is what it looks like. It's just beautiful. Jackie did a really, really great job in the collaboration with this palette, and it did not see the kudos and the rave reviews that it should have seen, because it was part of when ABH was doing the, like, every 2 weeks they were launching something new and everybody got tired of it. And also it was like collaboration after collaboration after collaboration, just boom, 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 right, one right after the other, and people got tired of it. But I do know there are quite a few people on this platform that own this and also think the same way about it. It is such a great eyeshadow palette. And honestly, one of the best formulations of ABH eyeshadows, because that one doesn't like fall out and feel as dry as most of the other ABH eyeshadow palettes that I have. I also, from Lunar Beauty, have the Strawberry Dreams palette. This palette, it's so pretty. It is just so pretty. And I love that you can get kind of wild with it, but it also is surprisingly really a pretty colorful neutral eye that you can get from this eyeshadow palette. Gives you like cotton candy sky eyes if you want it. It gives you bubblegum eyes if you want it. It gives you a really beautiful sunsetty look if you want to. It's just such a really pretty eyeshadow palette. And this shimmer here is so surprising and dual chromatic, kind of like pink to blue to purple. It's just such a really pretty palette. It really is. The only color in it that I don't love, that I've talked about before, the only shade I could do away with would be this gold here. But this one's also gold, and I would keep this one in check. This one's kind of like a really muted white gold, but that gold I think is, it reminds me of One of These Doesn't Belong, right? I wish it was like a really deep purple shimmer, or even like a really vivid pink shimmer would be great. But I just think it's such a beautiful palette, and I love every single eye look that I've gotten from this palette for sure. Then I have Natasha Denona Metropolis. You know, I have so many Natasha Denona palettes, and I go back and forth and back and forth and back and forth with which ones are my favorite. I love the Mini Xenon palette. The Mini Xenon is probably seen more use than any of the other palettes in my collection, but because it's so basic, right? It's just a black and white grayscale 5-pan eyeshadow palette. This one, I would say, going back to the thought process of what could I have and bring forth as 20 best that would suit an overall need and not just an in the moment need, it's going to be this palette. This is a really beautiful, warm color story eyeshadow palette that's got pops of blue, pops of green. It's got your golds, it's got your champagnes, it's got your browns, it's got some really, really beautiful shadows in it. The one caveat to this is it's mostly shimmer, and I do a lot more matte in my eye looks than shimmer, but I still think and will continue to think I can't see this being overcome by any palette as best because there's just so much variety in this palette. I do have a ton of favorites from Natasha Denona, but I still stand by, I think that is the best of the best as far as my collection goes from, and I have like 27 of her eyeshadow palettes. I'm not saying that I'm the end all speak all, but in my humble opinion, that would be the best one. It would go back and forth, I guess, between that one and the green brown, or even the retro. It may be up for a run for its money in the coming years. The next time we do this, we will have to see. The next one I have is Ace Beauté, and for Ace Beauté, it's going to be the Flare palette. This is just my favorite palette by them. I have, I think, 6 palettes by Ace Beauté. They're all the old formulations, so God knows what it would be like if I had the new formulation in any one of them. But this one is my perfect fall-time eyeshadow palette, and really can lean like super heavy into spring as well. It's got those big pops of color, but also kind of those mid-tone grungies. This is a really great palette in terms of variety and in terms of seasonality. Like if you're going to wear your makeup by season, this would be a good eyeshadow palette that I think would fit into every single season. And it's my favorite of the Ace Beauty palettes that I have. My favorite Melt Cosmetics palette. Listen, I really love Morte and Vita. Okay, those are my favorite from an aesthetically pleasing perspective, but even still, this is also aesthetically pleasing. It's got to be the Melt Gemini. This for me is just a really beautiful eyeshadow palette that I feel like I could use every single day. The only thing that it doesn't have in it for me in terms of what I like is going to be a really, really light toned like brow bone and inner corner shade. I think that that's missing from this palette. But other than that, every single eye look I've pulled from this has been so pretty, so beautiful, so grungy, and just the best of the best as far as I'm concerned. So I could easily get a shadow stick from NYX and be perfectly fine using that for the rest of my life with this eyeshadow palette. Then I have Pat McGrath, and let me open this up. So for Pat McGrath, my favorite would have to be Utopian Dreams. Pat is not one of my favorites. Listen, I go back and forth between whether I need her palettes in my life and whether I don't. She's nothing, in my humble opinion, like Natasha Denona for me. With that said, this one is probably the most different of the eyeshadow palettes that I feel like she's put out in the last, however many years, because while it is pink, it has some really great like special shades in it that lean so not pink, really pretty purples, really pretty gold, really pretty like dusky colors. It's got a really light, beautiful like brow bone shade, and it's just so, and these mattes for me have worked better than any other mattes that I have encountered in a Pat McGrath eyeshadow palette. Pat McGrath does not have my favorite matte formula. I find it actually pretty difficult to work with for the most part, but I love her shimmers. Her special shades are amazing. So this would be my favorite from Pat McGrath. The next one you guys probably could have guessed as well is Glamlight, and my favorite from Glamlight is going to be the Glamlight Chucky palette. I am pulling an awful lot from 20 to put into my 20 best that even shocked me, because not a lot of them are super colorful. This one is absolutely not colorful at all. I don't know what it is, but this color story really has got me by the pinky. Like, I love these like really deep grungy grays and reds and purples. And if it's not a warm eye look, I want to be doing my eye looks in this kind of color story all the time. I really find that their mattes blend superbly, and especially in this palette, that was a shock because there's grays in here, and grays are not the easiest formula to make, right? Grays, purples, greens, probably the hardest. These are beautiful grays, blend super easy. There's not a whole lot of redundancy in here. There's beautiful reds and eggplants in here, beautiful shimmers in here that kind of fall out, but not like a lot fall out. And like just the theming of it, like Chucky, come on. Of all the horror movies, like that one's the one that I remember the most. It's the most vivid for me as a kid because my brother had one of those My Buddy dolls, and I was terrified of it for the longest time because of Chucky. But I love that palette, and I think in terms of the formulas, it is quite possibly the best by Glamlight. My last brand is going to be Morphe, of all brands, and my favorite is the Morphe Such a Gem. This is one of those bigger than your body kinds of palettes. 39 shades in it, but I mean, this palette is in a sea of shit that is known from Morphe. This palette is truly such a gem. It's got like these center shades here, which kind of have a quasi super shock formulation to them. You can tell because when you touch them, like your finger just kind of melts into it. But also like it's just a palette of sheer pinks and purples, which I love on my face, but it's also got some really beautiful browns in here. The mattes in here are not bad. Really easy for building. They don't void out the other colors amongst them. It's got really beautiful like brow bone shades, really beautiful like inner corner shades. I just think it goes really light. It goes really deep. I think that if I got rid of every other Morphe palette in my collection, this one would have to remain because I just have such a great time with it. The only one that I do not love in this palette is going to be this one here, which I think you can see is a pressed glitter. We just need to get rid of pressed glitters and pretend like we've never ever had them ever, because they're awful. But that's a personal opinion, of course, but this palette is just, it's just beautiful. And while I am not a Morphe fan, I cannot stand Morphe. I don't ever and have never talked poorly about this palette because I just love this palette so dang much. So with that said, that is my 20 best from 20 brands. And these again are 20 brands that I have in my collection that I have had and tried, and like no Pam left behind kind of mindset. 3 or more palettes from these brands in my collection in order for me to bring these palettes in as my 20 best. Let me know what you think of the choices that I made and maybe what your favorites would be in terms of these brands. I don't think that these are the same brands that I went for when I did my 20 worst, but that's just to say like they maybe, you know, didn't have a best as opposed to the worst, or didn't have a worst as opposed to the best. So, or maybe I think all of them are bad except for this one. Maybe. Who knows? Thank you guys so much for joining me today. I would be sure interested to hear your thoughts and opinions down in the comment section, so don't forget to hit me up down there. I appreciate every single one of you for being here today. I hope you enjoyed the video. I also hope that you and yours are well, that you are safe, that you're healthy, that you're getting along as best you can, that you are staying sane in this holiday season, and that you are loving each other, but loving each other from afar. And until next time, bye, friends.
Don't be jelly over my Banana Babe sweatshirt. I'm not wearing the pants today. I'm wearing Mickey Mouse pants because it's like sweatshirt up here, pajama pants on bottom. Don't be jealous. Don't be jealous. This is